Michael, do you think I should do a screen, behind some kind of blurring or anything? Do you think I should do
You
that?
can do that, but since this is an audio-only version, I don't
Okay. No problem then.
And as a matter of fact, I really like the idea of this not being too perfect. The idea here is that we're going to show all our warts. Welcome to Beyond Leadership, adopting a coaching mindset. In this series, our conversations aren't about biography or polished advice. They're about how decisions are made in the real world when the pressure is on. We'll anchor on one situation where the path wasn't obvious and explore what goes on in the mind of a leader when confronted with real trade-offs, imperfect information, and the need to move anyway. This podcast is brought to you by Peer Plaza. Human help, instantly. My guest today has spent much of his life in leadership roles, though he says the pattern started earlier than most people realize. As a Boy Scout, he became a patrol leader and discovered what it meant to be responsible for others. Later, he built a career as an attorney and eventually earned an MBA focused on international leadership and innovation. But the moment I want to explore today happened when he stepped into a director role at a large Danish IT company and made a very deliberate choice about how much control he was willing to give up. And thank you, Jens Birk, for coming to the program today. Good to see you. I want to start out by setting the scene. Could you tell our listeners what the situation is that we're walking into right now?
Yeah, well, I actually left the company for 3 months as a part of a maternity leave. And when I went to maternity leave, I told my director at the time that I wanted to have a new position when I came back. And to my satisfaction, he said, "Sounds like a good idea for both of us."
Okay.
So I came back fresh from the maternity leave with a new role. And in this new position, I would be the supervisor of something like 100 employees and 7 business lines and 4 team managers. Up to that day, in these positions I've had until that point, I never thought that my own bandwidth of decision making or overviewing the business units or whatever I had the responsibility of was a problem. I could do everything myself if that was the case. But here I came to a conclusion that I needed to trust on my managers. I needed to trust on their ability to make their own decisions, even though I could see that at some point they were going in the wrong direction. As long as I could see, so to say, light in the end of the tunnel. Because if I didn't allow these managers to take their own decisions, then we would not have the business development that we needed to have. I needed more bandwidth in the department.
So you felt that you might become the bottleneck.
Yes, exactly.
What was the risk of letting those decisions play out?
Well, to my assessment, I knew that some of these 4 team managers was not capable or was not mature enough in their position to actually cover their own businesses in a whole. I knew that. I could see that. But I thought that if they did not have the room for development, for the first, this would mean that the department would not get the development that we needed. And the other thing is that I concluded that they wouldn't get the development that they were supposed to go through in their position as a team managers. So it was some kind of the best way of developing both the business and the managers themselves, right?
At the same time, that might have backfired.
Yeah. Yes, yes, and that was also one of the reasons of why I was pretty much in doubt of whether this was the right thing to do or not.
I like that phrase, because most leadership stories get cleaned up after the fact. We hear about the decision that worked, but not the uncertainty, the second guessing, or the mistakes along the way. The interesting part is usually in the warts.
That's right. But, in the end, I concluded that the backside of being the bottleneck would be bigger than any backside of this risk we could take by letting the team managers decide themselves. Because you could, of course, always correct errors or undo things they did if they had done something wrong, right?
Sure.
So that was my conclusion. And I also concluded, and that's something I always say to managers or friends or I have mentees. I always tell them that if you want to be a leader, you have to acknowledge that you have to be be robust enough to be alone, to be lonesome in your leadership, and some people don't understand what that means. But that means that sometimes you have to do decisions and you cannot share them with anybody because you are the one responsible for taking them, and you cannot talk to anyone if you are in the top of the organization, right? So that was also something I had to work with myself at the time, that I took this decision, but I didn't tell anybody. I needed to do it in my own room, so to say. I needed to be alone in this decision.
There's something about leadership that people don't always talk about. The higher you move in an organization, the fewer people there are who can truly share the weight of certain decisions. You can gather input, you can seek advice, but eventually someone has to sit alone with the responsibility and decide. So what I hear you saying is that you took the decision to leave the responsibilities up to them, and at the same time you didn't want to let people know that you were doing that in case it would backfire, and you would take the blame for that, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So I guess it was an easy ride. They did all the right things, and you took all the credit later on. Or were there some times when you wondered, hey, maybe this wasn't the right decision?
It wasn't the easy ride, I can tell you that. But I actually never came to a position where I doubted the decision, because I was absolutely right that the size of the department, the size of the business would have meant that I have been a bottleneck if I hadn't done this decision. And so therefore I was never in doubt that it was the right decision to do. And I could, that's another part of it, I could see already in the first weeks after being responsible of this department, I could see that at least two of the team managers took their new role and their new responsibility. They took it really in hand, and I could see that they developed from day one, and they really did the decisions without me being part of the process. So I knew that we were going in the right direction, no doubt.
So the way you're describing this is in part as an epiphany for yourself, learning something about yourself, of letting go. And I'm thinking previous to that time, do you remember times when, looking back in hindsight, you might have been a little bit more open to leaving responsibilities to your colleagues?
Yes. And I'm afraid this here shouldn't be a long history. Nevertheless, I recall a situation in a cold November evening, standing in the Swedish forests, having had a very, very long day facilitated by some Danish former special ops soldiers. It was in the same IT company. We were 19 colleagues.
Sorry, we should say here that KMD does a lot of work for the government. They do. So therefore, the soldiers and all of that. Okay.
No, that was not why the soldiers were there. No. It was actually a whole new project, a cultural transition we wanted to make, and the executive board of directors needed some advocates of this new culture, being able to help all the colleagues transition the company into this new culture. So we were 19 colleagues appointed to get this education by, a part of the education was planned and executed by former special ops soldiers.
Okay.
So,
that's interesting.
So we were in the forests of Sweden. We were made buddies 2 and 2, right? And we got the knowledge that we should go from point A to point B, collecting some posts on the way. Yeah. So we started in the morning. My buddy was a very process-focused colleague, and I am not that process-focused. I'm very goal-focused. So I knew that we had to be at the end of we had to be at point B no later than 3 p.m. This afternoon. And approximately 1.5 hours after the start, we were 45 minutes behind schedule.
What strikes me here is how differently people respond to pressure. Some become more process-oriented, others become more outcome-oriented. Neither approach is automatically right or wrong, but when the clock starts working against you, those differences tend to become very visible.
So when we came in the canoes, we canoed on the stream, and I said to my buddy, can you tell the other canoes that they should just canoe to the point B? Then I would go out of the canoe, collect the posts, and I will round up with you approximately 1 kilometer before point B. And he said, okay, I can do that. So he canoed with the other canoes from point A to point B, and I collected all the posts. And now we come to the situation you actually asked me for. At the end, 3 o'clock, 10 minutes before 3 o'clock, we were at point B, and one of the soldiers asked the team whether we did our tasks for the day, whether we were succeeded in this. And I said, yes, we did. And then one of my team members said, but what was the tasks? And that was a very good question, because I didn't delegate anything. I did the job myself, even though I knew I had a team of 8 other colleagues, which I could have delegated everything to. So, going back to your question, do you remember times where you could have delegated or you could have made a forum where your colleagues could have done this decision on your behalf? Yes. I come back to this freezing November afternoon every time, saying, Jens, you are at this point. I was a human. You are 35 years old, and you haven't learned that you have to trust other members of your team if you want success. What is that? What is that?
So, did you learn from that experience in the moment afterwards when you realized that you could have delegated, or was it later on when you realized that delegation is such an important part of leadership that it took you back to that? Which one was that?
I think you are, it was in my mind from that day that I have something that I need to work with. And I think that's a part of leadership that you must never forget, that even how long a period of time you have been working as a leader, there will always be something that you can work with, right? Yeah. Because it's interhuman action. So you always have something you can work with. But you are correct. It was at the moment when I got this appointment of being department director, I said to myself, I have to work with this on a daily basis. And I came back to the situation in the forest and said to myself, this is what's at stake if you don't do it. You will burn out. You will lose your energy. Your team will not understand where we are going. The strategy will be strategy, and it won't be operational, and we won't have success in developing the business.
I think every leader has seen this happen. A strategy can look brilliant in a PowerPoint deck and still fail completely in practice. The real test is whether people throughout the organization can turn the idea into decisions and actions when nobody is standing over their shoulder. I think one of the things that we should also take away from this is when you do it all yourself, you prevent others from understanding what responsibility is and from performing. And I think that that's a common mistake that managers and leaders make in doing things all themselves. I'll take care of this, because typically when you have experience, you can do things 10 times better and 20 times quicker.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you keep to that, your subordinates won't learn. And they'll constantly be coming for the teat, and they just don't mature.
I realized that if you actually fertilize talent, if you actually support talent, even though the talents in the end grow out of your department, grow out of your ability to development, therefore they will find other places to work, even though that could be the situation, you may never hold back talent. Because if you hold back talent, it will eventually be bad for your business, but it will also tell all the other people that doesn't work in your department that I don't want to work there because he's holding back talent. So it will be better for you as a leader if you fertilize talent, even though they find other places to work, because it will attract other talents. So if you fertilize and if you help talented people to grow and to mature in their competences and their ability to take on their own leadership, it will be incubator for even more talents, and that will by itself develop your business, and it would develop you as leader even further, because you will always be challenged by talents that knows more than you and wants more than you, and that's great. Because that's what makes it important to wake up in the morning as a leader, is knowing that you have a team that wants more.
Now that's an interesting way to think about leadership. A lot of people assume the goal is to build a team that needs you less and less over time. Jens is taking that a step further. He's saying the real reward is building a team that keeps growing, keeps challenging itself, and keeps raising the bar for everyone around them. So, how do you know when you're helping or you're enabling? How do you know when you have a direct report coming up to you and they're asking you for help with something? Something goes in through your mind and makes a decision about, do I help this person or do I make them do the hard work so that they grow? How do you judge that?
Mm-hmm. I had a consultant asking me at a point, Jens, are you really trying to understand people and their problems and how I could help them with their problems? And so I said yes. And then he said to me, why don't you shut up?
Sometimes the most valuable leadership advice arrives in a single sentence. It's funny because it's blunt, but it's also true. A lot of leaders think they're helping when they're really interrupting someone else's thinking process.
So going back to your question, it is often a matter of shutting up, listening. What are they actually asking you for? Is it help, or is it some kind of process they are in, being able to do the decisions themselves? And then sometimes it is obvious that if you let them speak and if you let them process the problems, when they are talking to you, they will come up with a solution themselves.
You sound like a coach, Jens.
No, I'm just old, you know. Sometimes, if you are a kind of person like I am, and you would come to me with a problem, I would see the solutions, and I know this because my wife is nagging me about that often. That if she comes to me with a problem, I have the solution immediately, and that's a problem, you know.
By the way, women love that.
No, they don't. Not in Denmark, anyway. Oh, okay. Yeah.
No. Not in Spain either. I have to admit, I laughed when Jens said that, but underneath the joke is something many leaders struggle with. When someone brings us a problem, our instinct is often to solve it, when what they really want is to feel heard first.
So it's hard for me not to come up with a solution. But I learned that if you actually, provoked by this consultant, if you actually listen, and if you actually let them talk until, and sometimes a little quiet pause in the discussion is okay, because then they will force themselves to coming up with solutions and so on. If you actually manage to do that, it's very rare that you actually need to do the decisions on behalf of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Saves you so much time, right?
Yeah, but it is hard sometimes because you are busy and you have mail account growing every day, and then people comes into your office and they ask you, do you have 5 minutes? And you actually don't have 5 minutes, but you cannot say that because you have to show awareness, you have to show that you're interested in what they do, and you have to be there when they need you, of course. So you take those 5 minutes, and then it is very hard not just, you know, if you can see the solution, it's very hard not to come up with a solution, because that, in the first conclusion, would be the easiest. But in the long run, it is not. So therefore, you actually have to sit down, and even though you did only have 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, listen, and let them process themselves.
So, good point. And you know, we don't want to make this too rosy either, because it is also, there is a responsibility on the subordinate side to grow and to learn and to manage their own problems. And so, yes, giving them 5 minutes here and there is a good idea. However, there's a point at which you question whether or not they're taking the ball and running or not. So we also have to fine-tune that. So it's not just about their development. We also have our deadlines, and we have milestones that we have to pay attention to. And sometimes we just have to blurt out the answer, because it'll simply take too long for us to do too much explaining. And it is knowing when to do which that shows how wise you are, right?
Yeah. And that is very hard. And that is why I think leadership is not something you can be educated in doing. Tools are, of course, a lot of it. But intuition and interaction with people, their understanding of importance of different goals and KPIs and what have we, you need to have a balance in that. And it's not something you know from day one.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you're talking about the difference between book learning and mentorship. Having a good role model, somebody who teaches you to shut up, for instance. Someone who shows you that, hey, let them speak. Allow them to figure this out. Because if you pop out the answer every time, they're never going to move their lips in order to hear what they're saying, to realize, well, that's not a great idea.
Yeah.
And then rethink that. And sometimes it's just a glance as well. I know for my own teams, somebody will come into my office and ask me a question, and I'll look at them, and they know they've done two things wrong. One is they came in asking me for an answer without having their own answer to begin with, right? Because I fully expect them to come up with something.
Yeah.
And the other one is not having fully thought it out before they come in, because just in general, we have to be very careful with our time. The higher up you are in an organization, the more careful you have to be about the use of your time. So they should learn and appreciate that, and their direct reports as well.
Yeah, you're right. Or how should I put it? If you are actually available, it is also easier for you to let them understand that this availability can only function if we have a mutual respect. And that means, yes, I will open my door for you. It will actually not be closed, so you can just go in the office. But you need to be prepared. You need, in respect of my time and in your own as well, you need to be prepared when you come to me. And I think that's okay to set that premises. I would do the same if I came to them, because as a subordinate, you also have a day filled up with meetings and mails and what have we not, right? So it's just a very profound culture to have that in respect of each other. Before I ask you, of course, I will have done 5 minutes of preparation to see if I had a solution myself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But coming back to the things we talked about before, letting people decide on their own, you just have to be sure and you have to be true to yourself that if you cannot any longer see the light at the end of the tunnel, you have to react.
How far do you let them go down that deep, dark tunnel before you say, stop?
Yes. And that is a very important question, because if you cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, you have to stop. Perhaps not in the first place correcting the team manager or who else you have the mentorship of, or who you are managing, but you have to at least stop up and try to process it yourself, asking yourself why you cannot see the light any longer. And if you come to the conclusion that the reason of why you cannot see the light any longer is because of the inability of this person's choices going on and the consequences of what he or she are doing. And then you, of course, have to stop it. You have to interact.
Ever wish you could just talk to someone who's been where you are? Not a chatbot, not ChatGPT or Gemini. A real human who gets it. That's Peer Plaza. Human help. Instantly. Whether you need a career coach, a leadership mentor, or someone to help you navigate a tough transition, Peer Plaza connects you with vetted professionals ready to help right now. Browse profiles, watch intro videos, and book a session. Just like that. Visit peerplaza.com, because the best advice still comes from real people.
So what I hear you saying is that you can ask all the facilitative questions in the world, and when you notice that that's not helping them, they're not seeing the options that they have, then this is the time when you intercede and say, hey, why don't I help out here?
Yeah. I think you have to do that, because the risk, and that's your responsibility, is that we're not going in the wrong direction. And then the strategy is only strategy, right?
I think that's one of the great frustrations in leadership. Strategy feels productive because it involves smart conversations, planning sessions, and big ideas. But until someone translates it into day-to-day decisions and behavior, it's really just a theory about how the world might work. Did anything go terribly wrong? Anything happen that, I don't know if you regretted, but maybe you wished you had interceded earlier?
I wish I have seen this being a leader as 25 years old. I wish I actually could go back and say to myself that you need to do this here, because it's so important for your employees that they have the room for development themselves. And that also answer your question, that it never came to a point where I wished that I had not done this decision. Having said that, Michael, it's never positive to have to lay off an employee, manager or not. It becomes very, very personally to me, of course, as a leader, but it becomes even more personally to the person you have to lay off. Because it's the family, it's their economy, it's their self-respect, it's everything. It's a shock, So if you come to a conclusion where you have to come to that position where you need to lay off another person, that's not a very nice position to be in.
When you've laid off people, what was it usually surrounded by?
Either interpersonal conflicts or the lack of ability to develop. The flip side of giving people room for development is that you need development to be in that room. And if people, sometimes people just come to work, right, 8 hours every day and go home and they don't want to be developing as part of the business. And in today's business, I don't think I can come to any workplace where you are in a position where you don't need to develop every day.
That may sound demanding, but I think Jens is pointing to something bigger than formal training or taking courses. The world keeps changing, our work keeps changing, and the people around us keep changing. Standing still for too long is often a decision in itself, whether we realize it or not.
When you talk about development, what goes on in your mind? Are you talking about technical development, or are you talking about personal leadership?
Both, actually. Right now, I'm in a position where I'm not managing formal leadership anyway, but I'm in a position where I develop my skills as a legal advisor, and that is actually very satisfying for me to be back in a situation where I have to develop my legal competences. I've been away from that for several years as having focused on being a leader, right? So I don't think that you could say either developing as a leader or developing technical skills or whatever it is. I think, and you know, being a father of 3, developing every day you wake up is actually a responsibility you have, because of the responsibility you have for other people. You have to develop every day.
Yeah, having 3 kids, that'll develop you.
Yes. At least number 3 will.
Any parent listening probably smiled at that one. There's a certain humility that comes from raising children because they have a remarkable ability to expose all the gaps in your patience, your plans, and your assumptions. That's development, whether you signed up for it or not.
But I want to go back to skills or personal development. And can you give me an idea? Is it a 50-50 split, you think, that people were let go because they didn't develop the personal side and the let's say the soft skills side, or they didn't develop the technical side? Can you define it in some way?
I can tell you that the situations where I had to lay off people that didn't want to do personal development was the easiest part for me. The other situations where we had technical KPIs or we had economical KPIs which a person didn't meet where a person didn't meet the requirements was actually easier for me, because it was based on some kind of objective measurements. I actually think that I have laid off more people who didn't develop in the technical or in the economical direction, that the KPIs, they didn't meet the KPIs, and so that has perhaps been the majority of the layoffs I have done. Michael, I think it's quite sad being discussing about layoffs, because it's very, but it's a hard, it's the flip side of being a manager, right? You have to do it sometimes. Yeah, and it's sad that you have, but you have. Yeah. And that's the world as we see it today, that when businesses develop, some people are just not either capable of going in the new direction, or they just don't want to do that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You were saying before that you had wished that somebody had told you these things 25 years ago?
I think I said 40. 40 years ago. I'm
40.
I'm 60 now, you know.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, many, many years ago. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Today, we have all these resources in coaching.
Yeah.
Do you think that coaching could have assisted you back then or not?
I'm not sure. You know, coaching is a lot of things. I have been using coaches both in as private, in a private setup, but also a business coach. But a situation as this one I told you before in the forest of Sweden, it was certainly not a coach saying to me that I needed to develop something here. It was special ops soldier who had put me and all the colleagues in a situation where the energy was gone. We were just so tired, freezing our asses off in the forests of Sweden. And coaching sometimes, of course, would have been good. But I'm not sure that would have been the right thing for me anyway.
Yeah. I just wonder how we view coaches. And you said to me, I don't think a coach could have helped me with that. And, you know, I'm just thinking that the coach doesn't really help people learn lessons. The coach unveils opportunities for you to learn lessons, right? The coach would say, what did you gain from that experience? Or what would you have done differently?
Yeah.
And that is the opportunity that sometimes we don't get as younger leaders and managers, where if you had to have a weekly or biweekly or monthly coaching session. So what went on? Oh, I had troubles with this one employee. And so what did you do? And okay, and what were some other things that you might have done that might have changed that situation? And then it gives you an opportunity to think about it. And the more of those experiences you have, the more you have the possibility of deciding to change. That's more of what I'm talking about.
Yes. And you know, as I said before, actually listening to your question makes me remember that some years ago, together with 5 other business colleagues, I coached a group of 12 youngsters from what we call a ghetto in Denmark.
I think it's important to pay attention to what Jens is describing here. This wasn't a conversation about business strategy or leadership inside a company. It was about helping young people see possibilities that might not have been obvious from the environment they were growing up in. Sometimes the most meaningful leadership happens far away from the boardroom.
Some of those guys, they were 14 to 16 years old, right? And the first meeting we had with these kids, one of the kids said to me that a week before, he had been approached by some elder guy from the community proposing to him a job. The only thing he should do was to sell those small bags, and then he would earn 3,500 or something like that every week.
Okay, so we're talking drugs here.
Yes. And that was, of course, a very easy way of having a lot of money when you're 13 years old, right?
Oof.
Yeah, and that was the path laid out for those kids here, right? And during a period of 6 or 7 months, actually, we succeeded in helping these youngsters in building their own project, so to say. And the idea of the whole thing was making them able to have an understanding on how a business actually works. And as of today, one of those youngsters, I think it's not more than 2 months ago, and he's 20 or 21 years old now. He came back to me and he told me that he has actually got an education now, and he is working as a soccer coach in the town where we come from in Denmark. And that really makes me proud that I've been able to help him choose another path and see what I could do for this guy, right? So going back to your question, could a coach have helped me understanding the importance of the decision to take as a leader earlier in my career? I have to say, of course he could. There was just not a tool that had been available for me earlier, right?
What I find interesting is that Jens doesn't talk about coaching as someone giving him answers. He talks about it as having a structured opportunity to reflect. Looking back, many of us can see lessons we eventually learned on our own and wonder whether we might have learned them a little sooner if someone had simply asked the right questions.
Jens, we've gone way over time.
Yeah, no.
Because it's just been so enjoyable to have this talk. I'm so lucky to have a job where I can have wonderful conversations with intelligent, wonderful people. And thank you very much for the time that we had today. Is there anything that you would like to add to our podcast today before I let you go?
I just want to say, Michael, that I think that the way your approach to these conversations, they are so, I don't know how to put it, the angle you put into this is very, very cozy. It's very, no, well, you need that environment to actually open up. So it's very straightforward. I very much look forward to hearing more podcasts from your side, and thank you very much for reminding me that developing every day you wake up as a leader is necessary for you to manage your business. You have to wake up and remember that every day we go to work, we have to develop ourselves as leaders, but also our businesses, our employees, the people we meet every day, right? So thank you very much for that, Michael. That's been a kind of wake-up call once again.
Jens Birk, thank you so much. All the best.
One of the themes that runs through this entire conversation is that leadership is less about having the answers and more about creating the conditions for other people to grow. Jens learned that lesson in the forest, in the boardroom, and in mentoring young people. It's a lesson that seems to keep teaching itself no matter how much experience we accumulate. I want to thank Jens Birk so much for sharing his story and his insights with us today. It's been a real pleasure having him on our show. Thanks to my guest and to all of our loyal listeners. Subscribe today so you don't miss upcoming conversations. And if you found this podcast valuable, please leave a review. It helps others discover the show and keeps the dialogue growing. For more information about Scale U and Scale U retreats, go to scaleu.org, where you can find the full library of podcasts, blogs, and additional resources. Thanks for listening. See you next time.